We stopped here last week. We talked about understanding test case design, where we described what a test condition is, what a test case is, and we gave examples. And I remember asking people to type in to the chat box examples of test cases of valid and invalid test conditions that could be tested for login scenario, and I quite got very good feedback from there. So today we are going to be moving on to a bit of the practical aspects, and I would like to request that everyone is alert here. You are alert and you can follow step by step what we are doing in this situation. So we have an example here. There is an application, a software, a web app, and that is the URL. So in case you don't know what is called URL, that is the URL. And I have two test cases here. That is test case 1 and that is test case 2. And we want to verify the condition that a user can sign in with valid details. We have the test steps outlined here, and we have the expected result. The actual result is what the tester sees, and they can come in here to type in what the actual result is. And if the actual expected result matches the actual result, the tester is expected to update the status here to say it has passed or failed. So that is one example. And the tester would need to follow the test steps. And for each of these items in the test case 1 ID row, the test case is meant to be a unique ID for that particular item or feature you're testing. So for each of these test steps, you follow through to the expected results and document the actual result and document the status to whether it's a pass or fail. For test case 2, with the condition we are verifying here is the sign in with invalid details. Now, the tester repeats the same test steps. As you can see, they are the same. They read the same, but some things have changed. The first step says go to GetIn website. When you go to GetIn website, you're expecting to see the landing page displayed. The landing page is also displayed here. The second step says click Get Started Free button. Here it says click Get Started Free button. And what you have is sign-in page displayed. Sign-in page displayed as expected result. You have not started executing your test. Please note, what you are doing is basically static testing this particular test case that you've written down as a tester. The third step here says enter username. The same here, enter username. The fourth step says enter password. Enter password. Now, you would notice that we have a different username here, yeah, and a different password here compared to what we have in here. In test case 2, because we are verifying invalid details, we've actually written our username as test@test.com because we know that that is invalid, and we've supplied password. And we move on to click click the sign in button. And what we expect here for our invalid details is that the error message should be displayed. The error message could say, please log in with valid credentials, or it could be your credentials are not valid. When I say credentials, I mean your username and password. Now, if you go to the valid test case here, when you enter the username and you enter the password, we are seeing this, taking this as a valid test case, and we are saying that our data here is valid. The test data we are using here are valid test data. The test data we are using here are invalid test data. For valid test data, when we submit that and sign in, our GiftReach home page is displayed for the user. When you enter an invalid test data, you get an error message. So I'm going to go to the browser now to execute this. So we can all see what's going on. If you can see my browser, please let me know in the chat box. I want to be sure that everyone can see. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So I said we are going to the URL. So let me see if I can put those steps beside this so we can follow. Okay. So what you should be seeing is my browser, Chrome, where I have opened the URL. So the first step here, I want to sign in with valid details, yeah? And I say go to GiftReach website. That is what we've done. That is the URL, www.GiftReach website. The expected result says GiftReach landing page is displayed. What do we see? Can you type in there? That's the landing page. The moment you click URL, and it takes you to a page, a live page, not 404. 404 means the page is not found. Then there's an issue. But if you land on a live page, the landing page, such as this, that is your landing page, yeah? So you type in here your actual result. Your expected result is GiftReach landing page is displayed, and your actual result will be GiftReach landing page displayed. That is what you type in here. GiftReach landing page displayed. Now the second step says, for the sake of time, because we've lost some time here, I'm not going to type here, but on the next slide you're going to see what I'm saying. So the second step says click Get Started Free button. So if you come here, let's remove this. All right. So that's the Get Started for free. That's the button. Okay. When you click on that, what is it expecting you to see? The sign-in page. Can you see that is highlighted here? Yeah? Okay. Then enter username as this and enter password as this. Okay. For the sake of clarity, what I'm going to enter in here I know this password. I'll just use because I'm already a registered user on this site. So, okay, so that's it. I'm going to enter my username and I'm going to enter my password. So I've not actually put this password, my actual password in here because this is a training and it's personal to me anyway. So I'm going to come here and type it in. And I will type in my password, which is only known to me. So enter username, username entered, that's it. Enter password, password entered, that's it. Click sign in button, and that's the sign in button. So as a tester, you need to be specific on the steps you are directing people to click on, okay? So that's me clicking on sign in. And what happens? I am able to land on my home page. That's it. That's the home page. I have been able to sign in successfully. I'm going to log out now. So I will enter my password. We've just completed the valid sign-in test case. So with an invalid sign-in test case, taking you back to last week, we said we could use a valid username and an invalid password. So I'm still going to use my valid username. Yeah, that is it. And I'm going to enter a wrong password. When I click on sign in, it says click sign in button. Can you see what we've got here? It says your login credentials are invalid. Please try again. So basically, that is one test case. Those are two test cases completed. For a login scenario, you could have more. You would definitely have more than one test, more than two test cases to cover. But for the sake of this training, that is one example. And as you can see on the next slide, if you sign in with valid details and your actual result is as expected compared to your expected result, your actual result is the same as your expected result, you update this column and you enter pass. Okay? Now, if you sign in with invalid details and you have the result as expected, error message is displayed as expected, you have to pass every step that you have seen when you were going through those actions. You pass them. As a manual tester, that is a way to do that. Now there are tools which we'll be doing next week. We'll be looking at tools next week, because what we basically use here is Excel. So if you don't know Excel, you need to learn how to use Excel to write test cases, manual test cases. However, to keep up with technology, even as a manual tester, you need to learn how to use tools, test management tools to execute your test. So what we've just done is executing a login test case. Yeah. Another example, I prepared some documents as well for this training, because you're going to be getting assignments as well to write your own test case, to create your own test case template and follow what needs to be there, and follow this. Enter the test steps, enter your test condition, enter update the test data that you've used, and add your expected result and actual result, and complete that to let us know whether your test has passed or failed. This is okay. Okay, so this is an example of a test case, a sample test case template. In the traditional waterfall and V model environment, where you need to prepare your test cases prior to while the development is going on, you need to create test cases and identify them with specific IDs. There are IDs that are unique to them. So if you're working on a project, you're going to have a project name. You write the project name here. Your test case templates are executed by you, or prepared and executed. Now, then you have your created date. It will be reviewed because your test cases need to be signed off. It will be reviewed by the test lead. It will be reviewed by the test manager, or it could be any of your peers if there's more than one tester there. Now, on this particular template, now I deliberately left something here, and I want somebody to type in the chat box. If you can static test this particular template. There's something wrong here, and I need you to look at it closely. And if you can type that into this place, and I'm just going to give you a clue. If you say you are a QA person, you are a tester, you're about quality, you have to pay attention to details, yeah? And you also need to be able to identify if there are one or two things that are wrong in a document. So what another thing we are doing here is a document review. So if you have any idea, please type in the box here. There is something wrong with this template. Yeah. Is anybody typing anything? Okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay, test condition for first test case is wrong. Okay. The test condition for the first test case is wrong. So here we are looking at, thank you very much for spotting that. It's meant to be valid username and valid password. Okay? And well done to the person that spotted that. Yeah, well done. Thank you so much. So, I mean, when you're manually doing all of these things, you need to also review your documentation. And another thing I noticed here, when you're given, okay. So there's a typo here. So I would say to you, you have to be careful when you're doing or spell check your work. Get used to spell checking everything you put in your documentation, especially if you are a tester. It's not totally accepted. Some people might pardon you for that, but trust me, because you're going to be working with different kinds of people out there. So you have to be careful, okay? So that's it. I think I've passed the message across to everyone here, and I hope, okay, yeah, there's another thing I need to talk about. Okay, we've looked at this. Now, in the traditional testing environment where you are not actually going to be automating your test, but if you're going to be going on the automation testing training, you need to learn how to write your test using the GetIn syntax. Now, this also gives you the test steps that you need to follow to execute the test that we just did on gifttreat.com. Okay? But you need to note this. I have put this in bold. Given. This given identifies the precondition. The when, the action, and the then, that's your output, that's your result, that's the expected result. So please note this, especially if you're coming on the automation testing training, because you're going to be using a tool called SpecFlow. And if you're going to be writing your test, you'll be using the given, when, then syntax. This also tells you the steps you need to take. There's a precondition, there are actions, and there are outputs. Please make note of this. You will need this later. Thank you. I will move on. So, black box testing and white box testing. We talked about this last week. We said the black box testing looks at the internal, the black box testing is concerned with the external part of testing, like the tester does not need to know what is going on. If something is black box, you're definitely not going to know what is inside the box. But if it's white, I'm just giving a literary example, you would be able to see what is inside. So make a note of that as well. When you're doing black box testing, you don't need to have any programming knowledge to do black box testing. When you're doing white box testing, you will need a programming knowledge because you will be looking at the internal structure at the component level to test. And I would say, if you're going to be doing automation testing, you will be doing mostly white box testing as part of your test execution run. Even as an automation tester, you need to know your manual testing properly, because when you run the test manually properly, applying your testing techniques as you should, you will be able to apply that when you also want to write your test code to run your automation test. Now, there are categories of test case design, techniques. We have the specification based, which is the black box, and we have the structure based, which is the white box. For the ISTQB certificate exam, you need to know all of this, and you need to be able to identify when to use equivalence partitioning. You need to be able to identify when to use boundary value analysis. You need to be able to identify where to use decision table testing, the state transition testing, and use case testing. So I think if you know when and how to use this, and you know they are all specification based testing techniques, then you're going to be a very strong manual tester, knowing how all of this works. For the white box testing techniques, you're going to need to learn programming language as well, because sometimes you may need to go into the developer's code to see what they have implemented, and then you're able to write your own test. So experience-based testing are those techniques that you fall back on when there is no adequate specification from which to derive your specification-based test cases on, or you have no time to run the full structured set of tests. So this happens sometimes. The experience-based testing could mean that you also have the domain knowledge of testing within that application. If, for example, you want to test in a cloud-based environment, and the web apps are built using the Azure cloud. Now, if you haven't got that kind of the experience of testing in the cloud, you may struggle, and you are not basically given anything to say these are the steps you need to go to execute to be able to test it. So that is one. And I'm also saying tomorrow is the Azure cloud training. So no knowledge is lost. Every knowledge you gain here will add up to whatever it is. So please try and attend that. At least you have an idea of that. So the error getting takes advantage of a tester's skill and experience with similar applications. Same here, so that you know what tests can be captured by the normal techniques and what tests cannot be captured by the formal techniques that you know. Then exploratory testing, it combines your experience as well with a structured approach to testing where the specifications are either missing or they are inadequate. Say you get on a project now, and they tell you we have a web application, but we don't have any requirements document. So you and I know that in this age, every one of us would have gone on the internet to browse a website or basically to do shopping. Amazon, you go on Amazon and you do shopping. So they hand you the URL to that particular web application, and all you go in there, you are not going to go in there looking for, click on this, click on that, submit this. No, you use your experience to kind of approach the testing in this instance, in the instance of exploratory testing. So I want to go into a deeper example of our equivalence, our black box testing techniques, so that you have an understanding or a practical understanding of what I'm trying to say here. So we have the boundary value analysis example here. So this is based on testing at the boundaries between partitions. Sometimes when developers write their codes for specific requirements, errors occur mostly at the boundaries, and sometimes this could be as a result that the requirement was not captured properly, or somebody omitted an information, or somebody did not pay attention to detail. No, so I need your attention to detail here, please. So if you look at this example, I say if there is a minimum value here specified 1 and maximum is 100, please get ready. I'll need you to type in the chat box as we go on. And the input condition is between 1 to 10. So between 1 to 10 we have 2 to 9, yeah? Then the boundary values that we would be looking at for our test cases here. Now remember your test cases. 2 things I need you to make a note of again. When you want to write a test case, think of the positive scenario, think of the negative scenario. Think of the positive scenario as the valid scenario, and think of the negative scenario as the invalid scenario. Okay? Now you could have different test data to check your invalid scenarios. Okay? But your positive scenario would always be one particular data. Okay? So, looking at the boundary values here, what we can pick up is there are the boundaries between 1 to 10. The boundary values that we are able to identify here, looking at 1, that is the minimum. The boundary values here are 0, 1, and 2. Okay? And the boundary values for the maximum value here, which we've defined, is 9, 10, and 11. So how does this work? This is my question. If an app can only accept valid data, where my valid data are between 1 to 10, what would my valid test condition be looking at from the test data point of view? What test data do I need to test the valid condition? Anybody, do you have an idea? I want to test but I need test data. My test data will be between 1 and 10. And I want to test for valid test condition. What would I use here? Okay. 1 and 10. I can see 2 to 9. So I can see 2 to 9. All right. Now, thank you very much for everyone that has responded. If you said 2 to 9, you are right. Any number that you use, any of the values that you use, if you use 1, any value from 2 to 9, that will be the test data that you need to use. Now, you don't need to write your test case for 2, test case for 3, test case for 4. No. As long as you pick 1 of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? Then you are okay. You have tested you've tested that particular valid condition, because the input condition I put here is between 1 to 10. Any other thing outside this will be your invalid test condition, and that will be 0. Yeah, that will be 1. Yeah, what else? That will be 10, and that will be 11. Yeah, well done. Thank you for following. I appreciate that. So, if we decide to, okay, I'm not going to deal with this because we haven't got much time. Oh, are some people putting the responses on Telegram? Oh, sorry, I'm not looking at Telegram. I'm looking at the chat box here. Okay. I'm looking at the free conference call chat box. So if I look at this other example, so I said pay attention to details. This is between and this is from. Can you tell me what our boundary values would be here? Just type in the chat box. What would our boundary values be here? Our boundary values here. Okay, I can't see anybody typing in. Okay. 10, correct? All right, thank you, Tina. So 10, you're correct, because this condition says from 1 to 10. The boundary values are exactly the same as what we've got here, because these are the boundaries. These are the boundaries. The minimum is 1, the maximum is 10. Your boundary for 1 is 0 and 2. Your boundary for 10 is 9 and 11. Now, if you want to identify your valid test condition, what will it be? I just need you to give me a range. Give me a range. What would be your valid test condition for this example? Anybody? Oh, yeah. I can see that. 1 to 10. That is fantastic. Thank you very much for that. And your invalid test condition will be anything outside 1 to 10. As a tester, pay attention to every single word. If you're given any story, any requirement, pay attention to everything. Between is different from. And sometimes they need you with your testing hat on to call the developer or the BA's attention to something like this. You have interpreted this correctly, between, but somebody has written the requirement assuming that it should include everything. So that is that. Your invalid test condition for this will be 0 and 11. So I'm going to give you the other ones as homework to do. So then we move on to equivalence class partitioning. Now, this allows you to divide set of test condition into a partition, which you should be considered as the same. So when you partition, okay, say for example, these input conditions are valid. They are valid between a set of values. We are saying between from 1 to 30, yeah? And we want to test, we partition them into 1 to 10 and 20 to 30. And in this case, we want to put them into equivalence classes. So equivalence classes, such that when we pick one value from each of the class, we are either testing the valid condition or we are testing the invalid condition. In this case, for your valid input condition, you'll be looking at this one. It says set of values from 1 to 10, and the same thing is from 1 to 10 for this one. So let me just say from partition it to 1 to 10 and 20 to 30. So in this case, your valid input condition for this one will be 1 to 10. If you pick any value from here, you are actually testing the condition that covers 1 to 10. Okay? Another valid input would be what? Anybody? If your 1 to 10 is valid, your 20 to 32, because they are equivalent, you partition them into equivalence classes. Your 20 to 30 is also valid. Okay? Now, if you want to look out for the invalid equivalence classes, anybody with an idea? What would they be? Okay. Okay, so okay, 20 to 10, that's valid, correct. So 15, I need you to give me a range because we are partitioning them. 0 and 31 are boundary values. I'm looking out for equivalence partition. Okay, somebody has said 11 to 19. Excellent. Excellent. Then anything greater than 30, 31 and above, and anything less than 1. That will be 0, minus, whatever, all the negative numbers, that will be it. Okay, fantastic. I know you've all got some ideas. Thank you so much for responding to that. So the equivalence partition classes partition okay, that's for the valid. Let's put this as invalid partitions, invalid equivalence classes. So as you said, anything to 0, that would be your negative values. Somebody said 11 to 19. That is correct. That is invalid. Somebody said 31 and above. That is absolutely correct. If you want to select any value from each class to choose to test, for this one, if you select 3, you are fine to use. The moment you select 3 from this partition, you have covered every test case for all these values. If you decide to pick 22 or 25 or 27 for this, even if you decide to pick 30, you've covered every test case that needs to be covered, because you don't want to write 10 test cases because you want to test all of this, or you understand what I'm saying. So you pick one from here, one from here. The same from here to test the invalid classes. It could be -2. For this one, it could be 13. For this 31 and above, you can pick 31. You can pick anything as long as it's above 30. So that is equivalence class partitioning for you. So please, I would say basically you can give yourself examples. Go on Google, look for lots of examples, and in the ISTQB textbook as well, there are examples there. Now, if we look at the decision-based table, now there are times where you would need to identify your output based on actions. Yeah, most times there's an action you take and then you get an output. But this time around, you need to cover different types of scenarios, and this is where your decision table comes in. Sometimes they call it a cause effect table. So a combination of inputs is a technique that you use for functions that respond to a combination of inputs or events. So I mean, some things need to work together before that particular function responds. So I need you to pay attention. If you're on your bed, get up, stretch, open your eyes wide, because you need to understand all these manual testing techniques. You will always apply them regardless of whatever application you're testing. And you don't know what application you will test anyway. So the first rule here, the example says a submit button in a contact form should enable only when all inputs are entered by the end user. I need the user to enter a name, I need the user to enter an email, and I need the user to enter a password. Rule 1. Sometimes some people say they will call this the logic. So that's the logic. The logic requires that this must be entered, this must be entered, this must be entered for this to be enabled. Right now, can you see this is not enabled? If it is enabled, it will turn blue. So I've not done anything, I've not done any thing here. So you're not going to see this turn into blue. But what we just want to verify is that, as you can see, this is not going. This is not enable. This will not enable itself unless you enter these details. Now, if you look at this, rule 1, name. Do you have anything in there? No. That is why we have false. F is false. T is true. Email false. Password false. Will this be enabled? I need answers in the chat box. True or false? Will this be enabled? That's a false. Yeah. Yeah, good. Just type false or true. Okay. For the second one, rule 2. You've entered the name. There is no password. There is no email and there is no password. This will be what? Good. False. Thank you. Rule 3. False through false. This will be what? False. Okay, thank you. I can say that. Good. Rule 4. True, true, false. This should be what? Will this be enabled or not? False. Well done. Rule 5. False, false, true. What would that be? False. Brilliant. Rule 6. True, false, true. What would that be? All false. All right. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you for following. And that will be false. There is a combination we have not entered in here. We don't have the true. We don't have the true here. Yeah. So, and what do we get here? That is true. That is when your submit button will be updated. Well done. Thank you everyone for following. Okay. Now we move on to the state transition table technique. Yeah. So, okay, I've created a table anyway for this one. It's basically called the state transition technique. And what happens here, the changes in your input conditions changes the state of that application you're testing. So when you perform an action and you are imputing various input conditions sequentially. A good example, you go to the ATM and you want to withdraw. You need to be able to enter your password, your PIN rather. You enter your PIN and you're able to withdraw your correct PIN. And I'm sure every one of us know that if you don't enter it correctly the first time, you would need to enter it the second time. And if you don't enter it correctly the second time, you may need to enter it the third time. And if you don't enter it correctly the third time, your account will get blocked. This is what has happened here. Can you all see that? Yeah. First time, what happens? You are granted access. Your account doesn't need to be blocked here. You are fine. Now, if you enter your PIN number incorrectly on your first attempt, you are prompted to go for a second attempt. And if you enter it correctly for the second attempt, you're granted access. So the same way, if you don't enter it correctly at the second attempt, you've input your incorrect PIN second attempt, you're not going to be granted access. You're going to be prompted to go to the third attempt. But if at the second attempt you enter it correctly, you're going to be granted access. Okay? If at the third attempt you enter it correctly, you're going to be granted access. If you enter it incorrectly, your account is going to get blocked. So that is, if you think of the way the ATM machine works, when you're entering your PIN number, you're not entering it correctly, that is called the state transition test case design technique, because you may have work on an application that requires you to use this approach when you're writing your test. So you may basically be creating like a matrix for that, and you would be able to, okay, I need to move back to my slide, and you will be able to understand, you'll be able to understand how you want to execute your test. I mean, some people feel, okay, well, anybody can do testing. That is right. But if you also know the techniques to testing, yeah, it makes it easier for you, and you can progress from there to do more technical testing, or approach your testing. And if you are in an environment, in a development team, they are talking about these techniques, or asking you, so how are you going to test this? You already know what the application is doing. You could say, okay, I'm going to use a decision-based techniques to write my test cases. Or this particular one needs me to use equivalent partitioning. That's what I'm going to use. You need to understand all of this, so that when you go out there, you'll be able to use these techniques for your testing. Okay, thank you very much for that, and thank you for being attentive. I will go on to our next topic. Our learning objective for this particular slide is to be able to understand test management, risk and testing. We need to understand entry criteria, exit criteria. We need to understand what the test plan is and the test strategy. So when you're looking at all of this, what is test management? Basically, you want to be able to manage how your testing process will be on a particular project. You want to be able to manage and organize your test case design, your testing deliverables, how to test, what to test, and when to test. And we will also need to be able to talk about risk and testing as well in this case. So there's no way you talk about test management without as well looking at risk and how it affects the fundamental test process, which we defined earlier. So if there is what is risk? Basically, the likelihood that an event would happen. Yeah. So whatever it is that is expected to happen in an event, it could result into a negative, future negative consequences, which would impact. It could impact anything. It could impact anything. For example, if we are looking at risk, we are looking at risk within the testing context. You need to be able to identify the risk. You need to be able to analyze the risk. You need to be able to respond to the risk within that testing context. Now, for example, the tester would need to prepare, would need to identify the risk involved that could happen. You need to be able to identify that in your testing. One of the risks is that you don't have enough time to test. You need to be able to identify that quickly. You've got 100 test cases to execute. You've written 100 test cases to execute for a particular application. Say you're working in a traditional waterfall methodology project, and you know basically that the time that's been allocated for testing is not going to work. There's no way you'll be able to identify that. That is a risk that you would need to quickly identify and let your test lead or test manager know. Why? Maybe they basically need to employ another tester so that the time it would take you to cover that testing would reduce if another tester is brought in. So that is another an example of a risk that you need to be able to identify as a tester. There are different deliverables you would have as a tester, but when you are able to identify things that could impact the delivery of the project from the testing point of view, I mean, you could identify from a development point of view, if the developers are not, if they are not delivering in time for you to test, that's basically going to negatively impact your testing deliverables as well. So you're not just going in on the work or the project or the company to just pick this, okay, enter username, enter password, oh, pass, fail, and oh, that's it, I've done my bit for the day. You need to be an all-round tester. So, and that is part of what constitutes that constitutes into managing testing, test management. So that's a simple example. So we have entry criteria. I know some people have asked earlier when Yemi was teaching entry criteria and exit criteria. We know that we're going to come to this, but I will talk about it a little more. Now, your entry criteria are used to determine when a given test activity can start. Think of it as this: entry, start, criteria. Another word for criteria, anybody? Condition, where? Determining factor, okay? So, they are used to determine when a given test activity can start. That's just a simple explanation. So it could include the beginning of a level of testing. We talked about levels of testing earlier. Well, we have unit testing, integration testing, acceptance testing, system testing, acceptance testing. Those are the levels of testing that are general across board. So it could include the beginning of a level of testing, or when the test design is in progress, or when the test execution is ready to start. So you could have your entry criteria into executing your test. You could have your entry criteria into writing your test case. Okay? Now, a typical example, what I've written here is just looking at it from the point of I want to start executing my test. Okay? What do I need to check? All test cases and test scripts are ready. So static testing this, as a tester, you shouldn't have any typo, basically. So I've corrected that. All test cases and test scripts are ready. When I mean ready, you have written those test cases. Those test cases and test scripts, they cover the requirements. If it is waterfall, they cover what the requirement says. If it is agile, it covers the user story. If the user story says test the login functionality, that means all your test cases should cover both valid and invalid test scenarios, including every other test data you want to use to test invalid scenarios. They are ready, and your test environment is ready and stable. Obviously, you don't test in live environment. You have to test in a test environment. You get on a manual testing job or automation testing role today, you ask for the test environment. We executed our test on giftry.com earlier on. That is a live environment. As you can see, I didn't go in there to put a test user account to execute the test. I used my user account because I'm already a registered user. And I was just using that as an example. It is possible you want to test in a test environment. The test URL will be different from the live URL. The URL is www.giftry.com for live, and you could have a test URL that would read differently, but it will still include the gift treat there. Okay? So another criteria checked. Another criteria, now the test environment is ready. The developer needs to deploy their code into the test environment. Note this, the developers develop in the development environment. The testers test in the test environment. Okay? So when the developer has finished writing their code and they've done the unit testing, they need to deploy the build to the test environment. Okay? What they are deploying is the code. The code, they build the code and the code is successful. It has to, when you go into tools, if you're going to go into automation testing and progress from here, you understand this more. Then we have our smoke test. Okay? Now, you have a whole bunch of 20 test cases to test. Your smoke test helps, your smoke test checks that your build is fine. They also called it a build verification test. Now, your smoke test is an example of you as a tester picking the URL and typing it in the browser. Okay, like we did earlier on. That's it. Like we did earlier on in the browser, in the Chrome browser. If you've been here and you're following, type www.giphy.com or www.amazon.com into the URL. If you type it in there and you cannot see a live page, like the page is saying page not found, error 404 or 500, server error, trust me, you cannot execute all those 10 test cases you have unless that is fixed. You go back to the developer to say the build has failed smoke test. This is really important. Okay, you first thing first, if that is not working, that is for a web application. You may not be testing a web application. It may be a different type of application in some other projects, you know, wherever you get a job. However, for any web application in this context, that is your smoke test. If that fails, you cannot execute your test. Now, I said the relevant requirement artifacts are available. Now, you know that if you want to check something, if you've been attending the business analyst course, we have what we call process map, we have what we call the wireframe, we have what we call the requirement document, we have what we call the test matrix. A test matrix can be created. It could be something like what we showed earlier on in the decision-based test case techniques. You have that matrix there, you have the matrix of the logic. Yeah, there. The logic is defined. Sometimes some companies call it mapping document. They map functions, they map features, they map users, they map personas on this document. And when they do this mapping, all these artifacts, you know where they are available. But that is one of the things you could check. If the environment where you're working, they can provide all of this. But if they can't provide all of this, you will need to work with what they've got. Okay? So, and as a tester, you need to ask questions. You need to understand the methodology that is being used wherever you work. So I'll move on. Now, that is the entry criteria done. So we go to the exit criteria. Exits, out. I need to get out. You know, criteria. What would that be? So I need to get out. What factors do I need to consider to get out? Testing is done. Exit criteria are used to determine when a given test activity has been completed or when it should stop. At the different levels of testing, that happens as well. oh, all our unit tests are fine. We exit from unit tests. Okay, we can deploy to test environment for tester for the tester to pick up the testing from there. So, excuse me, the developer is exiting from their own type of testing, and they're saying the application is ready, our build is successful, that's them. Now, for the tester, in this case, you are exiting everything. You've executed all your tests. That is check. You covered the requirement as agreed to say the requirement coverage is going to be at this level. Okay, that is fine. No high priority or severe defects are left outstanding. When we say high priority or severe defects, maybe, for example, you're looking at this application. Please listen attentively to this. If you have like a loan application, a loan application to test, okay, and all you need to do is to complete all your details, indicate the amount of loan you want to borrow, indicate your repayment date, and click submit. That is you. You've submitted your loan application. I've seen lots of loan application apps. They just work, almost exactly the same way. Just sign in, enter all those details. Now, when you complete all the form, and remember, this company, all they do is to give loans to applicants. Yeah. Now, when you test this application, you are able to complete all the forms, but at the point where you click on submit, nothing is happening. User cannot submit the loan application form. That is a severe defect. It's a critical defect that needs to be fixed. One, the requirement is not satisfied. The user requirement is not satisfied. In that case, the user wants to be able to submit their loan application, but you have tested it. You are not able to submit the loan application. If you cannot submit, the user cannot submit. That's a critical defect, and it's a high priority defect. So something like that cannot be left as outstanding. Now, what can be left as outstanding? Maybe some typo. Okay? Yeah. So at this point, you can say my exit criteria is fine because I don't have any high priority or severe defects outstanding. Then all high risk areas have been fully tested with only minor residual risk left. I'm going to give another example with the loan application. When the user selects the amount of money they want to borrow, okay, and the system calculates the total they need to repay based on the amount they are borrowing, because that logic needs to have been implemented from the requirements handed over to the developers. If to say a user of the application borrows £100, and by the selection of the £100, they need to pay back £150. That is what the product is meant to do. But when you, as a tester, select £100 and the calculation results into £149, you can't sign that off as passed, or it results into £151. You cannot sign that off as passed. What am I looking at here? Boundary value analysis technique. Something has gone wrong there at the boundary that the developer has not captured. It has to be 150. I borrow £100. The system should calculate my repayment as 150. Okay, so that kind of test will be a high risk area. Number one, why is it high risk? Somebody will lose money. The company are not setting up their application or their company up to be losing money. Okay, so you will need to pick things like that up. But if you don't have something like that happening on that application that you're testing, you can sign this part off. All high-risk areas have been fully tested with only minor residual risk left outstanding. You are on your way to exiting the testing. The schedule has been achieved. The release date has been reached, and the product has to go live. Sometimes your discretion on the number of tests you've covered and at the time the product needs to go live or for another level of testing also matters. So you must be smart when you test. You must be able to identify what test cases you need to cover first. You know, happy scenario. Yeah, fine. What could go wrong if I use an invalid data? You quickly test that. If you get satisfaction from that, you apply all your testing that you are satisfied with that. Okay, and you even have more tests, but however, the release date is near, you know, and the schedule has been achieved. Sometimes you could allow that to go to say my entry criteria is fine because you know that you only have minor tests to cover. Minor tests like is the logo displayed properly, you know, which you know that before it goes live, the developers must fix. Yeah, okay, it's okay. The logo is displayed properly, but I think it should be a little bit more to the side, you know, things like that. You know, you can't hold down a product to go live based on cosmetic items. And it's now left to the project manager or the scrum master or, you know, to say, okay, we are happy, the product owner to say we are happy for this application to go live. And of course, as a tester, you also need to give your sign off. So I'll move on quickly. So we need to cover a lot more. So test estimation. So the ISTQB syllabus details two test estimation procedures. Now we have the metric-based procedure and we have the expert-based procedure. One is based upon data. Okay, that's the number of, we have this number of test cases to cover. Okay, how many weeks is it going to take us? Okay, and the other one is expert-based. Okay, you're really, really good. You know where to look. Even by going on an application and doing exploratory testing, you are able to catch bugs and defects. So that's where your expertise comes in. So for the metric-based approach, it relies upon data collected from previous or similar projects. So if a similar project has been executed previously, you could use that as well to be able to estimate how long, okay, say you can write 20 test cases in a day. If you write 20 test cases in a day, you need 100 test cases. Okay, say in 5 days, 100 test cases are completed. How many days will it take you to execute? Maybe double of each day that you've used to write these test cases. No, see, all of these things are the kind of data that you would need. The number of test cases executed, time taken to develop the test cases, time taken to run the test cases, the number of defects found, you know, and the number of environment outages. Now, trust me, like, for example, I was trying to come in this evening and my desktop wouldn't run free conference call. I used it last week basically and there was nothing wrong with it. And 15 minutes to the time, I come in, okay, I'm ready, my slides are okay, fine. And free conference call was just coming up with displaying that I had no connection to the server. Okay, so you would be working on applications and then you're already enjoying the testing and all of a sudden your test environment has 500 server error or page not found, or in the middle of testing there are some inconsistencies found in the test environment. So all of this as well constitute to what would make you have make an informed decision or informed approach on your test estimation. Okay, so for the expert base, I've explained that one. you use your exploratory testing techniques. Now we move on to test plan. Now we know that when you get on a project, sometimes you get to that company, they don't have a test plan, they don't have a test strategy, and they need you as a tester. They've employed you, they need you to come and help them with a test plan. Your test plan doesn't necessarily mean you need like a 20-page document. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's just a document that describes the scope of your testing and the activities that needs to be done in your testing. It's a basis for any formal testing on any software project. Okay. The ISTQB defines it as a document that describes the scope, it describes the approach, it describes the resources, it describes the schedule of intended test activities. Okay, it is your blueprint. You want to build a house, before you lay the foundation, something goes on the paper. Yeah, okay. This is how we want it to be. A design, yeah, a design. Maybe you get an architect, so you need to have a plan. So you need to have a plan for your test project. So it does a lot of things. It helps to determine the effort needed to validate the quality of your application on the test. Yeah, it serves as a blueprint to conduct your software testing activities as a defined process, which is minutely monitored and controlled by the test manager. Okay, now by the test manager, the test manager could be you. All right, so the titles, the name, it depends on what works in your project and the company you're working with. When you have a test plan as an agile tester, you're owning that. Trust me. You would have a test manager. All you need to do is just to let him know and sign it off as long as the test plan aligns with the company's test strategy. Okay? Why do we need a test plan? I think I've explained that. It helps everyone outside the team and within the team. Developers, business managers, customers understand the details of testing. Okay? It guides our thinking. It's like a rule book. I mentioned that earlier. It needs to be followed. So if it is not written, it doesn't count, You need to write it down. There must be something. It guides our thinking. It helps, it gives us direction, okay? So important aspects like test estimation, test scope are documented in the test plan. I mentioned that. It can be reviewed by management team and reused for the project year. So if your test plan is reusable on other projects, oh, you're a fantastic tester, okay? And it's also good if you're able to write your test plan as well, and you need to research. If you've not written one before, I remember my first experience on a project, I was asked to write a test plan. I'd never written one before, but I know I had an idea of what a test plan should look like. And I know that if I go on Google, yeah, there are lots of resources there. If you type out a test plan template, you're going to get one. All you just need to do is to look at it. How does it align with the project that you're doing? What do you need to put there? I mean, you just need to be smart about it, do your research. So how to write a test plan? Analyze the product. Yeah, you need to know the product that you want to write a test plan about. You need to design a test strategy. With this test strategy, you are able to identify the approach. Okay, how are we going to approach the testing for this? Oh, this is a web application. Okay, yeah, we're going to do functional testing on it. Okay, what else are we going to do on it? Oh, we might need to have a browser compatibility test on this. Okay, that's fine. What browsers are those kind of things. Define the test objective. Okay, what's the objective of the test? We want to test that this particular application, the user can do what they want to do, what the requirement says they should be able to do. Is it user friendly? We want to define the objective that as the user being the application being fit for purpose. valid, and what we want to verify that and want to validate that it's fit for the users, it meets the need of the users. Okay, that's it. We want to define the test criteria, entry and exit criteria. Resource planning, this is where, okay, oh, this is a complex application. We're going to have lots of tests to write, or we need more than one tester to do this. Okay, all right. We're going to plan the test environment. Okay, this is one of the pain points for developers. Okay, the tester would always tell them, I need a test environment, while they are still trying to get on working on the development environment. Schedule and estimation. Yes, okay. By the end of the first week, we need to have been able to complete this. Okay, we are estimating 4 or 5 weeks to execute all the tests, or we are executing if it's like you're in a traditional software development environment. That's what you're going to look at. Then you are determining the test deliverables. What are the test deliverables? Oh, this particular application, we're going to cover manual testing and automation testing. Oh, we are also going to need some performance testing there. Okay, so there should be a plan. Or the plan would fall through based on the fact that you know the product, you know what the product needs to do. If it's a product that you're going to have loads and loads of users, I mean, why would you not consider some non-functional testing for it, like performance testing? You know, that's it. So testing deliverables, that's it. I'll move on to the next slide quickly. Okay, that's it. Analyze the product, know the product, who will use the website, what is it used for, how will it work, what are the software and hardware that the product uses. You know, that is one. That's one of those things that falls under the analysis of the product. Develop a test strategy. Now here we have the test strategy. It says a critical step in making a test plan. It's a high-level document which is usually developed by test manager. Yeah, that is very correct. The test strategy, test manager as in test manager. Okay, now you could be on a project and they don't have any tester. They've actually said, oh, we need a test analyst on this project. We don't have a test manager. But technically, you become the test manager and you need to write the test strategy document. Okay, define the test objective. That's the overall goal and achievement of the test execution. So I mentioned this earlier. Your objective is to ensure that you test the software and it is bug-free. Yeah, you test the bug-free before release. If you're able to do all of that, you test the software and all the functionalities are working as they ought to work. You define the target or the goal of the test based on the features that you've actually identified for testing. You define the test criteria. So we have looked at that, the entry and exit criteria. But trust me, if you work on 2-3 different projects that are not like they may not be the same. So your objectives, the objectives might be the same, but when it comes to the deliverables of the testing, for example, okay, we are not at the deliverables for that, but this particular line of the test criteria struck me to mention this. Now, for your deliverables, some applications may not need automation testing. So the only deliverable you will have in that test plan is manual testing and all the forms of manual testing that you can do. Some applications will need manual and automation testing. That falls under your testing deliverables. Some applications will not need non-functional testing. Okay, so I just said let me mention that before we move on. Okay, so we have resource planning. So this is where they look at, okay, how many people do we need for this project to be able to be able to complete this project? It could be human, equipment, materials needed to complete a project. Yeah, that's it basically. It depends on the application. So testing is context dependent. You may need some equipment to be able to complete some kind of test. There's some manual testing of the web application. you may need to install some software to be able to test. For example, accessibility testing tools. Now, what do I mean by that? If you go on uk.gov, any of those websites, those sites are enabled for people with any form of impairment, maybe visual impairment, the visually impaired as well, that they can actually, they know when they are on the website, they know they know what page they are on the website, because some functionalities will be enabled for them. They can't see the website because they are visually impaired, but some functionality is there reading everything on the website for them. So for that kind of manual testing, you need some specific software that needs to be installed, some equipment. So another part is step 6, plan your test environment. Okay, I talked about the test environment. Remember, a tester tests in the test environment. Whether they give you a database, whether they give you a web application, whether they've handed you an Excel spreadsheet, ask them, is this the test environment? Do not test in the development environment. Okay? So, testing environment will be set up, and the compatible hardware where you need to execute the tests as well, if there is a need for that. If it's just your laptop, that's fine. So that particular test environment should mimic the real business and user environment, because it should be working properly. Okay, so it should be, if you are sending requests to a server from your system, when that particular application is deployed, the tester too will be sending the request to that particular server. So it should be a replica of the real business and user environment. Oh, we still have step 7, schedule and estimation. I've explained that. So there's the project manager will usually be concerned with project estimation and project risk. So even as a tester, your contribution towards this will also be taken into consideration. Then if we go to test deliverables, a list of all the document, tools, or components that has to be developed and maintained to support the testing effort. So you deliver your signed test cases, if it's manual, if it's automation, or the tools, every component that would need to support that, all of this needs to be part of it. Then there are different test deliverables at different phases of software development. Okay, I'll put that in there. Before your testing, during your testing, and after your testing, there are stages of deliverables. Okay. Sorry, there's a sound coming from there? Somebody's not on mute. Anyway, so what is a test strategy? A test strategy is a plan for defining the approach to the software testing life cycle. The test strategy defines the approach. What approach are we using? Some would say, okay, we are covering, we are using the testing approach based on the kind of the application, and we want to cover this with 20% manual tests and 80% automation. That's just a simple example. So it guides the QA team, to define the test coverage and testing scope. It also aids the testers to get a clear picture of the project at any instance. So if you have a test strategy, there's a possibility that there would always be a proper test executed. No test activity will be missing. Because it just defines the approach, it defines the guidelines, and everything you have in a test strategy should align with the test plan. They could say if our application is built on is a cloud-based application, this is the approach we want to use for it. 80% manual testing, 20% automation. Oh, if application is not built and is not cloud-based, oh, we are just going to do 100% automation, you know. But and there's some other things. We'll cover this functional test. We'll cover this non-functional test, or we would also approach this using using tools, test management tools, or we'll just execute on our in-house tool. You know, all those kind of things will be defined in the test strategy. Test plan. Your test plan will be basically project-based. Your test strategy will define the approach, the overall approach in terms of testing for the entire QA team. So how you get the testing done, what you do to get the testing done, you know, this should be consistent across projects, you know, and everyone in the testing team would need to know, and they all need to be privy to this information. For whatever you do within your project in the test plan is basically for your project. Now, how do you prepare a good test strategy document? Every organization has their unique priority and set of rules for software designing. So you want to write a test strategy, you've gone on the internet, or somebody has given you a test strategy. Do not copy and paste, please. Don't copy any organization blindly. You need to do your own research and understand the application you're going to be working on. Always ensure that their document is compatible. If you want to use anything from their document, ensure that it adds value to that application you will be working on in your company. Check it is applicable to your organization's development methodology and the culture and approach you apply. For example, I would say if somebody gives you a test strategy template that they have used in their loan application company, and you are working for another loan application company, you know, that sounds alike. You know, you just need to know, okay, what are the commonalities between them, but do not copy and paste blindly. So that is very important. It will also define who will review the document, who will approve the document, the type of software testing activities that will be carried out. It will define the test approach, the how do we get there? What do we need to do? What process do we need to follow? You know, what type of testing do we need to add? You know, all those things. It defines the process of testing, the testing levels. It also defines the roles and responsibility at a high. All of this is at a high level. You define the test environment. Some companies overall, whether you have a large project team where you have some others, maybe 4 or 5 agile teams within the IT, the test environment could be the same for everybody. Okay. There might be a test environment with different test environment for specific types of applications. But if it's like a complex project, everyone uses the same test environment. It's only in other cases that they will say, oh, if you are going to use this application A with application B, you might need to create a separate test environment for that, you know, because we've actually not worked on this type of application before. And the test environment would not work with what we have currently. You know, some of these things can happen. So testing tools, automation and test management tools needed for execution. You also have to figure out a number of open sources as well. There are loads of open source tools out there. testing tools that are free that doesn't need to be paid for. Azure DevOps is one of them. So you, at least for a maximum, for a minimum number of people, you can use Azure DevOps. And there are other tools there that can be used to manage your testing. All these things are going to be defined in the test strategy document. Release control management, release management plan with appropriate version history that will make sure your test execution, that will make sure that test execution for all the modification that is done in that release. When I say release, now please listen carefully. When testing is completed by the tester and the user acceptance testing is also completed, or by the users or by the business, say everybody is happy with the application, it is fit for purpose, it covers all the requirements. You know, when you have all of that, that is released into the live environment. Now, when that is released, the developers will give that a release version. That's why you see version 1.1, version 1.2, version 1.3. Now, if after that goes out, then something else comes up, oh, we need to do this, we need to, when they are going to make that change, improve on it, and then add it to that release version 1.0 that has already gone out. But at that point, it's no longer going to be release 1.0. It would be release 1.1. So all of these need to have a control, because when you are at that point, you are defining how you want the release to be controlled. You just don't want to keep pushing into the live environment without being able to track what is going out. Okay, risk analysis. Okay, list all the risks that you can estimate, give a clear plan to mitigate the risk, also a contingency plan. All of this you would find in the test strategy document. Review and approvals. Yes, who is signing off? If you are the test manager, you're going to have to sign it off. But if you're happy with it, you send it out to the business team. You identify who is going to sign it off in the business team. You identify who is signing it off. The project manager should be there. So should be part of those that will sign it off. Then maybe the lead developer in your team would also need to sign it off. Then if changes are made on the test strategy template, it's always there. If anybody makes any changes, when they are signing it off, they are not just reading it and say, oh, that's signed off. They are going to critically look at it, and then if they need to give any feedback, they will give you a feedback to say, oh, I think, how about if we change this? Have you considered this? Things like that. That is what is required to sign it off. Then in the test plan, your test plan also would need to be signed off, but that is not at the team level. It may only mean your project manager. It may only be your project manager, your scrum master who is in your team, but it's not really like a document that you put together in Agile like that. But you need to have a plan, especially if it's a new project. If it's a new project, but if you go on any project, say in an Agile environment, all you just do is to pick up your test. In fact, when you pick up a user story, you're going to get asked the question, okay, how are you going to test this? What's the plan for this test? They are not asking you for the document. They are asking if you quite understand what the user story says, how you want to test it, and if you are happy with the explanation and the description there, and that is fine. But for a test strategy document, it is a high-level document, and it's a guideline that needs to be followed. So one looks like a parent of the other, okay? All you just need to know, you know what needs to go into a test strategy, you know what needs to go into a test plan. But also know that the test plan is project-based, and your test strategy is company-wide. It's a high-level document that covers all the projects in the company. Like, it's a company-wide document relating to testing in that company. questions. 10 minutes for questions before we round up. Apologies, we are about 4 minutes. We've gone 4 minutes over. All right. Can I see if we've got questions here? All right. QA stands for quality assurance. That's correct. How do you know if an application requires automation, and who decides if it requires? All right. If it's a web application, trust me, it would require automation. Basically, if you have to go on the website and there are lots of things that are quite repetitive there that a user would do all the time. A user would log in all the time. That's an automation item. Who decides that? You, the tester, you are expected to decide that. And you cannot shy away from that. And even these days, most companies require that they are happy when you say you can automate their application, the testing of the application. That's fine. Can we use more than one Blackbox? Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Those techniques that we went through today, yes, absolutely. You could be working on a project. Now, I need to bring you back. You could be working in an insurance company, an investment company, and they are basically all they are handing over to you are mapping documents with lots of and loads of data in there. And then you also have a database to look at, and they're not actually giving you any web application to look at. Yeah, you will need all your black box testing techniques for that project. I've heard an acronym, space dirt. Okay, I am just hearing that for the first time. I have no clue what that means. Is it a tool? I don't know. I think you will need to Google that. Okay, you will need to Google that. I can't see. I don't know. Sounds like a tool to me. Did I hear you well? That Azure class is tomorrow? Yes. Yeah. We have that. Please look out for all the details in the Telegram group. Yeah. Please, how do I get the soft copy of the software testing book? Okay, have you not received that? We had that put in the. Okay. All right. The software testing book, the PDF. Okay. Please, I do apologize if you have not received that. Please tonight send your request in to admin@blueskycitadel.com. Send them in tonight, and I would forward them to you. Okay. Any more questions? Everybody, please make note. You want to write your test plan? You have an acronym here, space dirt. It covers the scope, the people, the approach, the criteria, the environment, the deliverables, the incidentals, risk, and task. Thank you very much. 1 minute to go. Any more? I hope you've enjoyed this class. And next class, we'll be looking at tools. And Yemi is going to be taking the tools, the Azure DevOps tools. So tomorrow's class is on Azure Cloud. So next week's class is on the tools, and Yemi is going to be taking that. Thank you so much for today. Thank you for your time. Have a lovely weekend.